Alright, hello Astro subscribers, and welcome back to another video of the House Lords, the Vedic Lords series. And if you are new to this series, I've done several videos in it explaining this already, but I will proceed to do it again briefly just for those of you who are new. Now, the Vedic Lord system in astrology is a not very well known and slightly complicated system of determining where the fruits of particular houses come from. So, for instance, with the second house, this is very easily described in the tangible house system of like earth signs and whatnot. Good Lord. Hold on. Sorry, there are people on motorcycles. Alright, this being said, the Vedic Lord system is a system of looking at the rulers of particular houses in astrology and then figuring out from the relationship of the house ruler to the house itself where the fruits of that particular house come from. So, for instance, in terms of something simple and very tangible like Taurus, the second lord is going to show where your money comes from. So if you have second lord in the seventh house, you are going to primarily get money through the things of the seventh house, which is loans, marriage, dealings with other people, business partnerships, and sales. If your second lord is in the third house, you are going to manifest your wealth through communication primarily. So knowing these things is very useful because you can begin to see what avenues of life you can go through to get the results of that avenue of life. So, for instance, for the fourth house, this could be seen as manifestation of cars, manifestation of houses. You can see where these things will come from in your life. So, for instance, if somebody has fourth lord in the third house, they are going to, so meaning the planet that controls the fourth house for them is sitting in the third house. They are going to ultimately get their houses and cars through friends. They might have a roommate situation, or they might ultimately buy a house from a friend later in life. If somebody has fourth lord in the eighth house, they're going to come into these things suddenly through accidents or through unexpected circumstances, because that's what the eighth house represents. So these things provide a framework to see the gates through which the results of these houses come through in our life. So the sixth lord is not necessarily as tangible. It is a lord, or it is a house of, the sixth house is a house of argumentation. It is a house of logic. It is a house of editing information, separating the wheat from the chaff. This is why one of the symbols of Virgo is wheat, and this sign represents the working of the earth, but it also represents the editing of information. So, and also medicine and doctors. Anything that has to do with extremely fine levels of detail. And also, these people, they tend to be sort of tongue-tied, like people who are sixth house dominant, because the third house of communication is 10th, and the aspect of 10 always means a blockage. So there's a blockage of communication because the third house is 10th from the sixth house. So this is where, the Sheldon Cooper stereotype sort of comes in, like the Big Bang Theory, sort of like person who's extremely focused in on the details of things and has a vast amount of information, but has a tough time socially communicating with other people. This is basically the archetype of Virgo in action. And because Virgo, which is the sign that most clearly represents the sixth house, because Virgo is sixth from Aries, because that's opposite Pisces, or six is opposite the 12th house, and the 12th house is religion, spirituality, and imagination, and nature. These people have a hard time understanding spirituality and religion and nature from a logical perspective. whereas somebody with Pisces doesn't necessarily care if their worldview is incoherent. It works for them, and that's good enough. But that would drive a Virgo crazy. And of course, everybody has all these signs and placements in their chart. So it's not just a matter of being one thing, like Sheldon Cooper, who is basically only Virgo, but it's also you have to take the whole chart into account every time. But basically, the Lords of the Sixth House, its placement represents where you get your logic from. Because keep in mind, logic is not truth. Logic is just the ability to argue for a particular point of view. So, let's say your sixth lord is in the first house, the house representing Aries. This would mean that when you're arguing or when you're separating information, editing information, it's going to be in the service of your health, meaning you have a logical mind that can be used to heal yourself and potentially heal others depending on the placement. The nakshatra of the house that your sixth lord is placed in inside the first house. In the first nakshatra of the first house, you could see somebody who heals others much more, and then in the middle nakshatra, the one ruled by Venus of the first house, you can see a person who is much more interested in using their logic and their ability to separate useful information from non-useful information or falsities from truths to heal their own internal dilemmas and the dilemmas of their family. Sixth lord in the second house is going to represent somebody who uses their logic to assess material, financial, wealth related and aesthetic related things. Somebody with, hold on. A lot of loud engines today. Somebody with sixth lord in the third house is going to use their ability to logic and analyze and argue to sort of moderate their own speech, and because of that they can speak very slowly or have a speech impediment or have to constantly reanalyze and think over what they say chronically, and because of that they could be very precise in their speech, but they might not necessarily be the quickest communicator, even though they could get things right a lot more of the time. And of course this depends on circumstance and the rest of the chart that you're looking at. Somebody with sixth lord in the fourth house is going to use their ability to separate good information from bad information and logic and arguments and whatnot to organize their home. So this is generally a pretty good placement because your home can be a very valuable asset if you keep it clean, and these people are predisposed to keep their home clean because their organization ends up in their home and in their car and whatnot. Also, you can see mechanics from this placement because the fourth house is not just home, but it's also cars. For sixth lord in the fifth house, these people can be, can use their logic and logical skills to create better art, to create better stage performance. This is where you can see the person who works behind the scenes on movies, who works behind the scenes in theater, who works behind the scenes in an art studio, something like that. So you could see all the way from like a janitor in an art studio to a sound technician, somebody who designs Hollywood sets, a CGI editor for Marvel movies. All of that could be seen here. Sixth lord in the sixth house, these people are very critical of their own work, and as a result they can have a frustrating time working because they're always looking for the next best thing. So like these people might not even have a job at one point and they're still good, and somebody will offer them one and they'll be criticizing it like, oh, well, is this logical, is this is the right thing to do, all this stuff. And as a result of that, these people can be very frustrated, but also they do tend to end up in a very a job that fits them due to this criticism eventually, if they can just settle down and pick something. Sixth Lord in the 7th house. This is a tricky one, but basically, because 6th house is obviously 12th from 7th, which means the end or the dissolution or the the illogical resolution or the death of marriage. So, these people can, with 6th Lord in the 7th house, they can deal with divorces, but the way to mitigate that is, instead of dealing with the divorces because you jumped into a marriage that didn't make any sense from a logical perspective, you use your logic before you even get into the situation to figure out, measure the compatibilities and differences, and then you have a much less chance of having to deal with unpleasant situations like that in your life. So you have to use logic and common sense to vet people before you deal with them, because otherwise these people might screw you. So 6th Lord in the 8th house. So the 8th house is kind of a black hole that deals with everything that is not represented by your society's belief system. So it's everything taboo, everything occult, everything confusing, everything that you don't understand and don't know. It's psychology, it's the things that are hidden in your own soul, your own psyche. And because of this, 6th Lord in the 8th house represents somebody who is, it could be a psychoanalyst, a psychometrician, somebody who is into like occult, tarot reading, anything that's like sort of an applied psychological or occult or taboo science. It could be even somebody who creates like bondage, that kind of thing, bondage paraphernalia, that kind of thing. Anything that is, or it could also be a person who designs or maintains gambling equipment, because the 8th house also represents the, not necessarily gambling, but the inherent addiction or the confusion that's associated with gambling and the Wheel of Fortune, that kind of thing. So that could be somebody with 6th Lord in the 8th house. They're going to be really, really into occult science or psychological science, anything that's mysterious or confusing or hasn't been explored yet. You could also see like cave and underwater explorers from this particular position. And 6th Lord in the 9th house. These people are extremely critical of religion and belief systems, and because of this, they might miss the point of these religions and belief systems, but also because of this, they might come eventually to a higher understanding of religion and belief systems, depending on where their Jupiter is placed and where their Mercury is placed. And 6th Lord in the 10th house is similar to 6th Lord in the 6th house. These people analyze not just their work, but their purpose. So 6th house is sort of your day-to-day routine, whereas 10th house is your end purpose in life. Like, what are you here to do? What is your obligation to society, to other people? And people with 6th Lord in the 10th house, they are very critical of that purpose, and because of that, they understand their purpose and what they're here to do much better. However, if Saturn is badly placed, or if Mercury is badly placed, they can be very, very confused and still have that same critical mind, and that can be kind of negative and take a little bit more work to figure out what they're here to do. 6th Lord in the 11th house, people are extremely into technology. They're into designing technology. They're into the aesthetics of technology, the functional utility of technology, because 11th house is anything that makes a system better, is a reformer. And nothing has reformed the world more than electricity and technology. So these people are sort of not just critical of that, but that intelligence of Mercury that the 6th house represents, it becomes an editor, a designer, a programmer, a builder, a mechanic, an engineer, these kind of things. So this is a very good placement for intelligence and mechanical sort of understanding and logical systems understanding. And for 6th Lord in the 12th house, this is like the weirdest placement for this. Like, 12th house is just the weirdest house in general, but basically these people start trying to analyze the unknown, the collective unconscious. It's similar to 6th Lord in the 8th house, but it's a lot less applied, because the main difference between the 12th house and the 8th house is that the 8th house seeks power because it's ruled by Mars. and the 12th house seeks understanding, neutral understanding, because it's ruled by Jupiter. So basically, they're both dealing with the unknown, they're both dealing with the mysterious, the taboo, the outside of society, the outcast, belief systems, magic, psychology, mysterious things, God, the concept of God. But the 8th house wants to control these things and use them for its own benefit, and the 12th house wants to understand them and share that information because it's ruled by the sign of the teacher rather than the sign of the warrior. So either way, and that's basically where the logic goes with 6th Lord in the 12th house. It goes toward understanding the highest of spiritual, natural, and sort of interpersonal laws that this world has to offer, and finding new information and also understanding it logically and delivering it to people. So anyway, that was my video of 6th Lord through houses. And if you like that video, feel free to like and subscribe. Also, I've got a Fiverr page. The link is in the about of this channel. So if you want any astrological readings, feel free to hit that up. So yeah, all right, till next time.